Hi, everyone. Welcome to a rant from the other side, a story of journey to SaaS and evolving customer requirements. I'm Matt Goodrich. A little about me. I've run security and engineering teams for a number of companies, including my current company, Alteryx. The last 5 or so years, I've been focused on product security and the security architecture spaces. And before that, I spent a large portion of my career as a consultant with a heavy focus on identity. My operating philosophy is largely that I think security should be an enabler, not necessarily seen as a cost center or a department of no. I love telling teams yes, and here's how I would think about doing it instead of the no as a service answers that you may be used to with your security department, but hopefully not. A little background on Alteryx. Alteryx is a low-code, no-code data and analytics platform used to find insights within your data, maybe automate some data processes and more. We are really well known for our on-premises software, but have started playing in the SaaS arena within the last couple of years. Our on-premises software is running at about 1 in every 2 of the global 2,000 today, so it's pretty pervasive out there. And we are a B2B company. So in the context of customer identity, which we're going to be talking about today, we work with primarily business users and not consumers directly, which I think is an important call out. With that, we'll dive into sort of the journey to becoming a SaaS company. Like I mentioned before, our bread and butter has traditionally been on-premises software, but in the last several years, we've refocused on becoming a SaaS company. Of course, every company has a different journey. I've seen roughly some combination of the following repeated at numerous different companies. In roughly the following order, there's no exact recipe for this. And obviously, not every company starts with a desktop product. You might actually consider yourself lucky if you don't, because keeping these customers that are using the entire power of their desktop computing environment, you can do a lot of really powerful stuff that's a lot more difficult to do once you have things like browser limitations. So lots of exciting challenges there. What we've really found on the journey to cloud is that you have to decide what kind of cloud you want to be in, and you have a lot of different options. You might want the ease and simplicity of one single multi-tenant environment that all customers share. You might want to give some configurability to customers and how they consume your SaaS products, like the ability to host part of it themselves. You might want to give customers entire versions just for them, as in a single-tenant SaaS platform. But just like our products evolve over time, other products, of course, evolve over time as well. But the identity ecosystem and the security ecosystem used to support them changes as your software evolves as well. If you're as old as me or work for a company, maybe still undergoing a digital transformation or living through some sort of cloud mandate right now, you probably understand that there's a pretty big gap between the on-premises software that we grew up with and cloud software as it exists today. Something that was a brief revelation for me when I started working in desktop software was, especially after being on the cloud side for several years pretty consistently before that, was that on the desktop side, you have no guarantees of anything existing in the environment when you get there. So obviously with your software, you got to ship libraries, frameworks, maybe even drivers. That's, I think, to be expected. But once you start looking at things that you would find more easily in the cloud environment, things like secrets management and public key infrastructure, those are not guaranteed to exist at all. But on the identity side, you've got a lot of different flavors of things that you might have to deal with. You may not be guaranteed any sort of identity provider, single sign-on type configuration. So you've got to allow local login. If you do have an identity provider, or you just want to support some form of single sign-on or directory integration, maybe you want to plug directly into an LDAP provider like Active Directory. Do you want to support if you do want to support single sign-on, like what optionality do you want to plug into? Do you want to support SAML, OpenID Connect? There's some older methods out there like WS Federation. Maybe integrated Windows auth using NTLM or Kerberos, which you can certainly do in the old on-premises way of doing things. If we start to look at SaaS applications, public SaaS applications, a lot of those things start to fall away because we, as the service provider, own the environment. So going back to those two examples from earlier, secrets management, like every cloud provider has a solution for this, so it's fairly easy to integrate with. Public key infrastructure, same thing. That you got a couple of different flavors in most different cloud providers out there. Where we need a lot of the same optionality, though, is around identity, but probably not with the same number of options. So we probably aren't plugging straight into an LDAP provider or Active Directory. I have literally never seen a request for WS Federation support on a SaaS app. The integrated Windows authentication options, not happening unless your customers have their own SSO configuration that supports that integrated Windows authentication in their environment. So you can shed a lot of that responsibility back to the customer. But we all know the identity landscape is so much bigger than just single sign-on. When we were first getting into basic SaaS, there were some things that we knew we needed right out the gate. Of course, we're going to beat this SSO horse a lot. The very first request was customers want to use their own identities. So no real surprise here. Like I mentioned, single sign-on with SAML and OpenID Connect has met literally 100% of customer requests. We have not seen any requests for anything else. The next request we got was for the ability to manage identities and entitlements outside of our platform. There's a standard for this, luckily. It's called SCIM, the System for Cross-Domain Identity Management. And nearly every enterprise customer we've talked to, whether they were a customer or prospect, had this requirement. So this was really a no-brainer for us to either implement ourselves or work with our identity provider to implement it. Now, if you've ever worked with a large financial institution, you may know that they have business units that require sort of complete compartmentalization between each other. They can't see each other. They don't want to know anything about each other. But for you as a service provider, what that ends up meaning is you'll have a number of tenants that all belong to a single customer. All those tenants are all probably managed by maybe a central IT group or a central governance group or a business owner or something like that. And those same large customers are all about process and checks and governance. So they're going to have non-production, staging, production, maybe 5 or 6 other environments where they run their processes, their internal governance processes through. And so when you start to multiply these things, business units times number of environments, the number of tenants that you're actually providing to a single customer can be quite large. And that's really the basis of where this next request came through, which was sort of centralized identity configuration. So if you've configured single sign-on, for instance, before, changing SAML contracts and metadata endpoints and certificates, it's not terribly difficult things to do. But if you're doing it 10, 20, 50 times in a row, it becomes really repetitive, prone to error, and largely just a waste of time because you're repeating the same task over and over and over. There's not really a standard around this, and there's lots of different ways you can do this, especially if your identity provider has APIs and you want to sort of automate this using that. I have seen a couple of products out there support this, and they all call it different things. Federation Hub is one sort of version of that I've heard of. So when I'm thinking about all of these things and I'm starting to put together a checklist for what are my requirements going to be if I were to choose an identity vendor to help me solve some of this, this is what the checklist starts looking at. You're going to hear this next point a couple of times, but please don't write your own crypto. Please don't try to do this yourselves. There's plenty of open source projects out there that will help you, where you get lots of eyes and scrutiny on things and updates without having to constantly be on top of them. And there's certainly a lot of great vendors out there that'll help you. So please tend to look towards them as opposed to trying to write any of this yourself. So once we were in the cloud for a little bit, we started to see some more adoption. We started hearing customers saying, we trust you, but our data is really sensitive and we want to process it in our own environment. What that meant is we needed to look at a hybrid approach. Our hybrid approach meant processing data happened in a dedicated environment owned by the customer, but we were still largely responsible for maintaining that customer, even though it was owned by the customer. Customers often did this to keep their data private, which for us is great. The less we see, the more we're happy about that. So certainly love the data privacy aspect of this. But along with this sort of hybrid approach came other requirements from both existing and prospective customers. So our SaaS product wasn't born out of the green fields that developers so love. And I was once a developer. I love greenfield projects, love starting fresh and being able to do a lot of what you want and not have some of the constraints of existing systems. So I certainly get it. But our products were born out of acquisition. So acquisition, you're not usually acquiring a huge company that has security teams and lots of process and those sorts of things. You're acquiring typically a startup, probably small, scrappy, probably doesn't have a security team, or if they do, it's very few people to support the entire enterprise, not a dedicated product security team like some larger organizations would have today. Those early teams, they're shipping product as fast as they can. They just want to get something working to get as many people using their product as possible. But in some cases, they may make decisions that you have to go change later. And for us, that was the use of personal access tokens versus something like OAuth, for instance. So personal access tokens are great. Don't get me wrong. They're easy to use. They don't have a lot of moving parts. They're easy to implement, but they also have quite a few downsides as well. Like there's no really well agreed upon standard for how to implement them. They're pretty coarsely scoped, so you're often over permissioned, which opens you up to some additional risk. They're often long lived, certainly much longer lived than a typical access token should be, and they're harder to manage at scale. So our customers, or maybe more specifically the information security team at some of our customers or prospective customers, was requiring OAuth more and more. This honestly made quite a lot of sense for us. It's what we would have recommended if we were starting from scratch. So obviously OAuth, there's a lot you can do with it, a lot of grant types. And if going back to the SSO portion that we've talked about repeatedly, if you're already doing OpenID Connect, then you're already using probably one, maybe two grant types, authorization code and implicit. You're probably going to want some more grant types as well, because there's a lot of different things you can do here. But you're also going to want some extra security layers that some customers actually demand. Things like PKCE, PKCE, the proof key for code exchange, just to add an extra layer of security on top. Sort of the next type of request that we got was we had customers wanting to use their own tokens. Which at first I sort of batted an eye at. I'm like, that's not a request I've seen before. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense, right? These big enterprise customers, they're mandated to go to SaaS or to cloud, but they have really low risk tolerance. And the more they can use existing systems or existing technologies, existing tokens that they already own and control, the lower the risk they perceive it as, and the easier it is for you to do business with them. So luckily for us, there's a standard for this, JSON Web Key Sets, JWKS, and the ability to sort of delegate to a different authorization server is fairly easy. Hopefully. So if you have similar requirements, looking at the tooling that you're going to put in the environment, JWKS support is something I definitely advise. Now, if you recall from the last slide, visibility and monitoring were top of mind for more and more customers at this point. So understanding what users are performing, what actions across the system helps our customers in a number of ways. First and foremost, I think, is compliance. There's lots of frameworks out there, for instance, PCI, that require extensive and detailed auditing. Next, incident response. So understanding user actions across systems really helps contextualize information that you may need during a security incident. And lastly is cost optimization. So giving customers clear information on who's using the system, who's not using the system, will really help them make business decisions around licensing, maybe further business adoption of the tool, or other impacts to the business. Now, this next item can be solved in a number of ways. Sometimes it's in software, sometimes it's in your identity management system, or maybe you don't need it at all. But we all know that employees come and they go. But when an employee leaves a company, if they have a process running as their user, it's likely bound to break once they do go. And for us, that's where service principals came in, which sounds very similar to a service account, but I promise you it's different. I think of a service principal as more of an application level identity instead of a system or systems level identity. If you look at Office 365 as sort of a parallel to this, a service principal doesn't require a user license, but a service account does. Just sort of illustrating a little bit of the difference there. And of course, related to the last request around auditing, this opens up a little bit more of a wormhole. You've got a non-human identity in the system performing actions, accessing data, maybe writing data. And so obviously making sure that you can fit into that same auditing ecosystem is equally important. So we can add a few more things to our checklist here. And now at this point, we've had on-premises software, we've had multi-tenant SaaS, we've had hybrid SaaS, and so why not complete the trifecta and go on with private SaaS as well. So if you're lucky enough to have a large customer throw their weight around, and I probably use lucky in double quotes or air quotes, you're going to have to build something that you may not have wanted to build otherwise. Single-tenant SaaS is great. It is a bit of an operational burden, but customers with really low risk tolerances tend to think it's pretty attractive for them. But these really low risk tolerance customers tend to come with additional sets of requirements. And here we are. So the first one of those requirements that we saw was IPLL listing, right? It sounds easy. And a single tenant environment would be totally easy. But this request isn't just for single tenant architecture. And in our case, we can do it in a number of places. We can do it at the web application firewall, our identity management system. We could have our customers do it at their identity provider. It was nice having options, though each had their upsides and downsides. And you could end up combining a few of these approaches as well. Your mileage may vary depending on what your architecture looks like. Related to access controls, another request we had come in was around restricting access to users to only tenants that were owned by that specific customer. So if that isn't super clear, it's if I work for company A, I should only be able to access tenants from company A, even if I've been given access to tenants from company B. Again, there's not really a standard in place to solve this, but if given a fairly flexible rules engine on the identity side, we could fairly quickly solve a problem like this without adding too many development cycles. Lastly, we had a couple of requirements that require delegation tokens. Customers can configure jobs that run for a long time, where if you're using OAuth, even refresh tokens or longer lived access tokens, the ability for them to time out or having to get a new token in the middle of this long-running process could add some inherent complexity or instability, where something like a delegation token is really a reasonable approach. Most companies were microservices based. We have to do service-to-service communication. Here's another place where delegation tokens could be used. Of course, we could go implicit trust and just once you're in, you're in. I don't tend to like that. We could pass around access tokens. Again, you're probably going to run into some problems at some point. That'll be fun to debug. And if you remember from several slides ago, we have access tokens from different authorization servers depending on how our customers configure their specific tenant. So add some complexity there. Or we could use delegation tokens and sort of have everything speaking the same language and having sort of a translation layer to these new types of tokens. So we can add those things to our checklist. You'll notice once we get away from the well-understood problems, single sign-on, SCIM, sort of the table stakes, there's a number of ways to solve some of these problems. In my years as a consultant, and working for several different software companies, build versus buy is a conversation I had with nearly every customer or company that I worked at or worked with. But I am a firm believer in do not roll your own auth. Like I mentioned before, there are people that are much better at it than you're likely to be. So when looking to solve any of my auth problems, the more functionality I can get out of a solution, the better chance I'm going to choose that solution. So we started today with standards. Supporting those standards, like I mentioned, is basically a given. It's the functionality we can add on top of those standards without adding dev cycles. So we can keep our developers focused on what they need to be working on and not necessarily more commodity type things that we can solve with existing products and tool sets today. And with that, thank you. I'd love to connect with you and chat some more.